our vet, welcoming you to another episode of VETChat. Very fortunate today to have an old friend on the podcast with me, Ian Wright, who is the chairman of ESCCAP, the European, let's see if I get this right, Society for
First
Companion
test.
Animal Parasites.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, European Scientific Council for Companion Animal
Oh,
Parasites.
Scientific
That's
Council.
close enough.
I was
Close
close. You
enough.
knew. I knew what you were about, Ian. You're the worm man, aren't you?
That's it. It's close enough for government work. Yep.
So, Ian, I know ESCAP's a really interesting story because, of course, as well, you're still very much a practicing vet, and we'll talk a
Yeah.
little bit about maybe some of the challenges, some of the things that you're seeing different from maybe 10 years ago
Yeah. No.
in
Absolutely.
practice.
Mm.
But how do you, as a Superman, manage to do all of these things?
Well, it's a lot of balls in the air. I mean, I have a very, very supportive and understanding wife
Which helps.
that makes it possible, and
Yeah.
really good support teams. I know people always say, "Oh, I couldn't do it without," but
Yes.
I have a great team at the vets, and I have secretariats at ESCAP that keep me organised. So without those three influences, just everything would probably burn down. But no, I've got people who tell me where I need to be, what I need to be doing, and keep busy.
On
But
the whole, you get there.
yeah, absolutely. But still enjoying it, still enjoying practice, and of course, still love my parasites.
Yeah, I must admit, I think it was parasitology, which I was taught by Lord Trees, or it was microbiology, one or t'other of them. And I think it was parasitology I got a credit on. And
Ah,
of course, as a dermatologist,
yeah.
we all love to do a nice scraping. If you find a scabies mite, there's nothing quite like that
That's what we all live for.
whoop that goes up in
Yeah, that's
the
it.
back
Yeah.
room with the
Yeah.
microscope.
Find something exciting crawling under that microscope. Kind of makes your day, doesn't it, really?
I remember I always tell the tale, Ian. I was at a British Veterinary Dermatology study group meeting, and we had a human doctor there who was talking about parasites, and
Yeah.
he put a picture up on the PowerPoint, and he said, "This is a scabies mite," and of course he was showing a Calytiella mite, which we all took a bit of fun at the end, going up to him and saying, "No, it was Calytiella. No, it's scabies. No, it's
Disappointing.
Calytiella." Once the fifth person went, I think he began to get a bit embarrassed
Yeah.
that
Had to start backtrack. Yeah.
he'd got his parasites wrong.
Happens to us all on
Happens to the best
occasion.
of us, doesn't it?
Oh. So normally I'll get a blurred picture of something that might be sellotape or might be a tapeworm, and you're like, which one is it? It's always like a challenge.
All good. But the practice up in Fleetwood, just
Yeah.
small animals.
Yep, just small animals. Someone was
Yeah.
asking me the other day if I could advise them on their cow. And I was like, it's a long time, other than, bits of
Yes.
cow that might have like tapeworm cysts in. It's a long time since I've seen a living, breathing cow as a patient. So no, it's cats and dogs for me largely. Bit of
Yeah.
rabbits, small furries, couple of tortoises on the books. That's about as exciting as it gets, really.
And I think looking first at the practice element, are you seeing a lot of change maybe over the last 10 years in just the people coming in? I know now there's definitely an increase in the number of pets that are brought from abroad. Somebody goes on holiday, they
Yeah,
see a cat, a scrawny cat in Cyprus or somewhere,
yeah,
their heart breaks and they decide to bring it back.
yeah,
Cats and
yeah.
dogs, these will potentially come with parasites that at this point aren't that common in the UK. Is that something that you're seeing more of in your
Oh
practice?
yeah, absolutely. And I think, perhaps there's an assumption that because I have a certain interest in this field,
Yes,
that would increase the likelihood of me seeing
yes.
these cases. And, there are cases that come to me specifically because of my parasite interest. But even if I had no interest in parasites at all, there has been an increasing trend even in the relative peaceful suburbs of Fleetwood. We're seeing this trend of people adopting from abroad, and I would say it's become more the sort of norm now
Mm.
rather than it being an exceptional thing maybe 10, 15 years ago. it's very common now for people to either go online and they'll see,
Yeah.
a poor, pet that they want to adopt, or as you say, they'll actually go on holiday and see them there. So,
Yes.
as opposed, say, to pet travel, which took a sort of heavy knock in COVID, and now with animal health certificates has become a little bit more difficult. Still seeing a pickup in
Yeah.
pet travel again, but it's taken that knockback. I mean, importing, rescue pets essentially from abroad has just been an upward trend. And of course, the illegal importation of puppies from abroad to meet demand as well, which is another sort of issue that's going on in the background. So, these are big concerns going forwards. And it means that, if this is becoming more the norm, then a lot of pets will have been imported, especially over the COVID period. A lot of them, unfortunately, have behavioral problems. So,
Yeah.
some don't, or they're very well handled. The situation's recovered very well by their new owners. But if that situation doesn't happen, they can often be rehomed very quickly. And that means that travel history, the potential for them to have
Yes.
exotic parasites might be lost. So, I think increasingly, as vets and nurses in practice, we need to be aware that there might not be that obvious travel history, and exotic parasites, more unusual parasites might be present.
Yeah, I remember obviously as dermatologist occasionally, probably two or three times within my dermatology career, seeing Leishmania. We
Yeah,
went
yeah,
every conference we went to with ESVD. There was always a Leishmania talk because, of course, it's a huge
yeah,
problem in Italy, Spain,
yeah. No,
Portugal,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
and then starting to see them in the UK. And then I remember Sue Shaw actually had a case that seemed to have jumped from one dog to the other, although there were no sandflies present, but they thought were the
yes,
fleas
yeah,
or whatever.
yeah.
Where are we up to with something like Leishmania now? Is that something you're seeing on a reasonably regular basis coming into your practice?
Yes, it is. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, hopefully, some leishmania cases tragically don't live for very long. But if they're well managed, some leishmania cases will live for many months or years.
Yeah,
So you start to collect them, and they all require, if they're going to be well managed, they all require relatively close monitoring, ongoing treatment.
yeah,
So I think we're all getting more practice at managing leishmania cases these days. One of the misnomers, so we're having an increasing number of leishmania positive dogs coming in, and that means that hopefully, because some of them will be well managed and survive, we're getting increasing total numbers of leishmania in the country. And
yeah,
we're not unique in this regard. It's a huge phenomenon in Germany, where they've had very large numbers of imported positive dogs. And the concern then becomes, there's this feeling that it couldn't become endemic because we don't have the sandflies. And we need to be a little bit vigilant there, because the sandflies themselves are on the move. But if we
yeah,
assume for the foreseeable future we're not going to have sandflies, leishmania can still be transmitted in other ways. So, can be transmitted congenitally, can be transmitted venereally, and through ways that we're not fully, understanding.
yeah,
So, there have been cases of horizontal transmission where we're just not 100% certain how that's occurred. Maybe through licking of open sores has been
yeah,
suggested. Dog bites has been suggested. Blood transfusion, we know that it can occur that way. But also, there is a little bit of an open question, no strong evidence, but a little bit of an open question as to whether biting flies may act as mechanical vectors as well. So, just because we don't have sandflies doesn't mean that we shouldn't be vigilant, we shouldn't be taking sensible precautions. But the key is surveillance, really. It's screening dogs for leishmania that are coming in, and dogs that have relevant clinical signs that may have associated with travel dogs or may have travel history. Because if we pick these cases up early, the better our chances of preventing onward transmission, but also just of managing the case for the individual. If it's closely monitored, if it's on treatment when it needs to be on treatment, outcomes for the individual patient are likely to be better.
And of course, the other worry is there is a zoonotic implication to Leishmania as well. But do you feel if they're on regular treatment, that very much lessens the possibility of transfer to pet owners or whatever?
Yes, yes. So, I mean, Leishmania is a significant zoonosis, and not to be taken lightly, but people tend to get infected from sandfly bites in endemic countries.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not actually aware of a single human case that's taken place away from sandflies in an immune competent human. So, we shouldn't be, you know, taking too many chances. I mean, I did have a colleague that unfortunately took a blood sample from a Leishmania positive dog and accidentally stabbed herself with the needle. And I mean, she contacted her GP, and the GP was like, just wait and see what happens. You'll be fine.
yeah,
And, she was, as it transpired. But I don't think I'd be taking those sorts of chances. I think that sort of sensible precautions, good hand hygiene, especially if you have got open sores, avoiding prolonged contact with immune compromised individuals is very sensible. But I think if you're taking those sensible precautions, I wouldn't be overly concerned about the immediate zoonotic risk from Leishmania. The main concern is the risk to other dogs by
yeah.
onward transmission, and like I say, possibly through routes that you wouldn't expect. So that's where that vigilance is really important.
So taking you maybe away from the practice now, but into your position as chair, obviously of a European organisation, and I think although the British Channel was an isolationist tool for many hundreds of years,
Yeah,
that's very much gone with all of the travel, both
yeah,
of our pets into Europe, but also pets coming from Europe. Where are
absolutely.
you seeing, with global warming, we're starting to see ticks and so on that we've never really seen in the UK, like Dermacenta. But what would be your maybe five top parasites that, as an organisation, ESCCAP is particularly worried about? Probably the more exotic, the better. If you say fleas, we know they're here. They've
Well,
always been.
yes. So there are parasites like fleas and Toxocara around which there has been much debate, but they're ubiquitous. So
Yes.
they're in every country that you're likely to visit. Their prevalence might vary, but their distribution is very, very wide.
Ian, the one that I used to be reminded of from the dermatologist in Colorado, because it was so high up and so dry, they basically said we don't get fleas in Colorado. So that was interesting. But,
Yeah,
you know, I also
yeah.
remember this story Bob Dryden told, I think it's Bob, isn't it? About going to a vet's practice, a vet's house for a meal in Florida, and outside there was a brass plaque saying, "This is the house the fleas built," because he'd made so much money on, I think, selling flea treatments to them many moons
Well, yeah,
ago.
if you go to Florida, so that is, I mean, it is true. Yes, there are areas that are way too dry for fleas, and areas where they're just having the dream holiday. Florida,
Yes.
Florida is built for fleas, and pretty much every vector-borne pathogen you can imagine. But by and large in Europe, pretty stable. Our concern, yes, regards those parasites, but it's the rapidly changing distribution of some parasites which is likely to catch people out.
Yeah.
And that is a major point of concern. So, you have your old favourites in Europe. So you have your Leishmania and your heartworm are expanding, especially heartworm is expanding its distribution very rapidly. So, it's moving northwards, especially northwards through Eastern Europe. So, through the sort of Baltic countries, Romania, Bulgaria. in a lot of areas that you might not have expected. So that, doesn't mean it's immediately likely to arrive in the UK and establish, but it means there's more and more countries where, you might not be expecting it to be that it's arrived. And a similar thing at a slightly slower rate, but a slightly sort of similar thing is happening with Leishmania, in that sort of gradual increase in temperatures is allowing spread of sandflies. And then once you've got the vector with an increased distribution, temperatures and movement of pets allow parasites to move into new areas. So you have parasites like heartworm, where the mosquitoes that can transmit it are almost everywhere, but it's temperature that keeps it out. So as soon as the temperature comes up, that's like the fuel, that could ignite your heartworm fire. And
Yeah.
then infected dogs moving around, or wildlife reservoirs moving around, are the ignition that might allow it to establish in a new area. But you also have parasites like Phalasia eyeworm, which is, one of my new favourites,
Yeah.
that is transmitted via fruit flies. So fruit flies aren't parasitic, but they like feeding on eye secretions. That's how they transmit the worm. They have loved increased movement of vehicles, plant products, wind dispersal into warmer areas. So, there are lots of factors driving their spread, but it's the changing climate directly that has allowed the fruit fly to expand right across Europe, including into parts of the UK. So
Mm.
then, if you have infected dogs moving eyeworm around, that is a new opportunity for eyeworm to establish. So it's actually following its vector into new areas.
And so you're seeing clinical cases of thalassia, are you, in
Yeah,
the UK?
absolutely. Yeah, far more common than you might realise. And here again, surveillance is really important to watch out for untravelled cases, but also to see where the travel cases are coming in. So, little plug, I won't be forgiven if I don't have a little plug. The APHA with ESCCAP have a free worm identification service for Phalasia eyeworm, Dirofilaria repens, which is a subcutaneous worm that's closely related to heartworm, and Linguatula serrata, which is called the tongueworm. It's a nasal pentastomid. It's a lovely little shrimp-like creature that can live up your nose.
Yes.
So if you think you've seen any of these in dogs and you've got or cats and you've got specimens, you can send those specimens in, confirm their identification, but also they will contribute to surveillance data and mapping in the UK.
What are the clinical signs of thalassia? Do you want to go over a quick sort of how you
Yeah, so so
identify?
so what all those three parasites that I've just mentioned have in common is that they could all establish in the UK. So Dirofilaria repens, mosquito transmitted. It doesn't need the warm temperatures that heartworm needs.
Yeah.
Linguatula serrata, nasal pentastomid, is transmitted through raw infected offal consumption. And we have had an untravelled case in the UK the year before last. We don't really understand how that happened. It may be that we've got a little bit of a reservoir already in our wildlife or livestock, but it was eating imported food, so it may have come in from imported
Yeah.
food. But once it's here, it could start to cycle in our livestock, deer, sort of wildlife, sort of rabbits, quite easily. So so that's another one that could establish. And then Phalasia eyeworm in fruit flies. So Phalasia, you tend to see the worms. Just, but what could be more exciting than finding some worms either behind the third eyelid or wandering across the eye? And they cause, unsurprisingly, they cause eye irritation. So you get conjunctivitis, ulcers. So those are the sorts of signs that you'd be looking for there. Dirofilaria repens, unfortunately, is often subclinical. for picking it up quickly. But when it does cause clinical signs, can be nodules on the skin, or it can cause eye problems, or you can get just a lovely big incidental worm. So it's a famous case of one that came into the UK from Greece, if I remember rightly, and it had no clinical signs, the dog. But when they did a pre-scrotal incision for castrate, the worm climbed out, and it was like, hi, it was like 14 centimetre long worm. So, you may find them incidentally. You might get skin lesions. And then the most common time that linguatula is identified is when it's sneezed out on the carpet. And the owner, gets on the big red phone. They're like horrified,
Yes.
going, "Oh, I've got something that looks like an extra from Alien, and it's just been sneezed out on my carpet." But there is some potential for direct zoonotic risk with linguatula. So, it having been sneezed out on the carpet, you'd want to treat it. So,
What treatments are they for the three cases?
okay, so Falasia, there are licensed macrocyclic lactones that you can use. There's
Yeah.
products that you can use there. Dirofilaria repens for a long time. Moxidectin imidacloprid has been licensed, so you can use that. Occasionally, with Dirofilaria repens, you need to operate on nodules. And with Falasia, it's always good to actively flush the worms out of the eye as well. Linguatula is a bit tricky because there hasn't been, well, very many cases that have been followed through and written up. But it would appear that they're sensitive to macrocyclic lactones. And you can always just go in with a scope and physically fish them out as well. Like
Yeah.
some sort of bizarre hook a duck game. You just go in, pick out your linguatulas. And that's a good way of checking that you're clear of infection as well.
Yeah. Perhaps just to finish, obviously tick-borne diseases now, what ticks are we starting to see? I know ticks
Well,
like dermacentra have been travelling up, but what sort of
yeah.
diseases are we seeing more commonly, like babesia and so on?
Well, yeah, so there's two phenomenon going on. So, there are ticks that we've always had. So we've always had dermacentra. They just live in little pockets in the
Yes.
UK. I mean, we have visiting dermacentras as well. But there's an ongoing risk in endemic areas for dermacentra in the UK that babesia could establish. So, if you're in one of the patches in Wales, southwest, southeast of England, just being aware if dogs present with IMHA or IMT that
Yeah.
babesia could be the cause and that it might be in an untravelled dog, just like in the Harlow outbreak a few years ago.
Yeah.
That's really important. So we need to be aware there. We've got lots of Ixodes ticks, always have done, but they are more active. They're active for longer because of climate change.
Yes.
And because we've got increased green space, which is wonderful. That's a wonderful thing. We've got lots more forest. We've got increased green space in urban areas with wildlife corridors. It's very easy for wildlife and ticks to get closer to people and
Yeah.
for us to go out and enjoy the great outdoors and come into contact with Ixodes ticks. So we just have to be aware of that potential for increased contact as humans, but also for our pets that might be enjoying the great outdoors. And I mean, with Ixodes, we have the ongoing concern about Lyme. The new player in town in the UK is tick-borne encephalitis virus, which we know is present in little pockets in the Thetford Forest and in the New Forest, which is like, New Forest is absolutely beautiful. I'd encourage people to go and enjoy it. Love the New Forest, but please take some tick precautions because it is like the
Yeah.
inner circle of tick hell down there.
Do wear trousers and have socks that go over your trousers.
Absolutely. Just abandon fashion. Just have,
Yes.
trousers in your socks. But those are new areas for tick-borne encephalitis virus. But unfortunately, a poor human individual had a case in Yorkshire with no travel history. So we need just to be aware for the possibility if you've got a dog presenting with unexplained neurological signs that TBEV might be present. And we are seeing, or we appear to be seeing, an uptick in looping ill cases in dogs as well, which of course always been present in the UK. But I think it's to do with increased awareness, but also just more ticks active
Yeah.
for longer, more opportunities for us to come into contact with them. And then finally, always want to be on the lookout for Rhiphocephalus sanguineus, which mercifully we don't have in the UK. It's not quite warm enough yet, but if it's brought in with imported or travel pets, it can set up shop and live in your home like fleas do. It loves a bit of central heating, loves a bit of humidity, and it will feed on anything that moves and can transmit a wide range of pathogens. So we just need to be aware for that possibility as well.
Ian, it's always fascinating to listen to you. You're obviously a huge enthusiast for all things creepy
Well,
crawly.
you as well.
I am, yes. I'm just not quite at your level, but it has been fascinating.
No, my pleasure.
I think bringing up to date, it's so good that obviously you've got the ESCCAP experience, but you're in practice. And I found when I was doing my dermatology, having the first opinion element
Yes,
as well as the
please.
referral element was very good from a just seeing the bigger picture. Specialists, if they're only seeing one type of case,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
it can limit them. So the fact that you're still in practice seeing all these, you're getting a really good idea, even up in the wild north of Fleetwood.
Well, yeah,
That
it doesn't get any on this bit of peninsula. It doesn't get any further north than Fleetwood. So yeah, it's
well,
pretty,
if they're getting that
pretty low
far up,
ridges here.
they're getting up, aren't they? They're traveling.
Absolutely.
Ian, thank you so much. It's really useful because some of these are obviously really important parasites, and it's so important, I think, also to understand the localities because more and more we need to look at how we localize and we personalize treatments for
Absolutely.
pets as well,
But
don't
I
we?
think my take-home message would be vigilant. Never
Yeah.
think it couldn't be parasite A because it
Yes.
doesn't live here. It
Yeah.
could always be parasite A. If you've got
Yeah.
relevant clinical signs. So it's just having that flexibility really and testing if you think you might have something.
Ian, thank you so much. I know how busy you are with the practice and with ESCAP, so thanks for coming on, and hopefully see you very soon.
Brilliant. My pleasure. Take care.
Thanks, Ian. And listen, thanks everyone for listening, and hopefully see you on a podcast or a webinar very soon. Take care, and apologies for my shifting about. I have a bit of sciatica at the moment, so if you're seeing this rather than just listening, you might have got a bit seasick with me swaying. But
Get better soon. Rest up.
thank you, Ian. All right, take care, everyone. Bye bye.
Take care.